Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The intellectual landscape of the 12th century was a crucible of synthesis and conflict, a domain where the rigorous logic of Hellenistic philosophy met the profound spiritual commitments of Islamic theology. Within this vibrant arena, Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali's magnum opus, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, or Tahfat al-Falasifa, stands as a monument of unparalleled critical acumen. This essay undertakes a direct and systematic evaluation of the internal claims, logical structures, and philosophical mechanisms presented within Ghazali's seminal work. Its purpose is to analyze, section by section, the precise manner in which he deconstructs the metaphysical certitudes of the peripatetic philosophers, primarily the towering figures of Avicenna and Al-Farabi, by wielding the very tools of formal logic and rational argumentation so prized by his adversaries. Ghazali constructs a formidable case for the limitations of human reason while it ventures into the unseen realms of divine reality, thereby carving out a protected space for the truths of revelation. This analysis will proceed through the major thematic groupings of Ghazali's 20 discussions, elucidating the specific contentions and evaluating their coherence and persuasive force as they appear within the text itself. Section 1, the metaphysics of creation and the world's beginning. Opening salvo of the Incoherence of the Philosophers addresses the cornerstone of the philosophers' cosmology, the doctrine of the world's preternity. Ghazali's first discussion is dedicated to refuting their claim that the world has existed for all time, co-eternal with God. His method is a forensic examination of the logical underpinnings of the Avicennan argument. The philosophers contend that an eternal and unchanging God, possessing an eternal will, must produce an eternal effect. For God to create the world at a specific moment in time would imply a change in the divine will, a preference for one moment over another which is incompatible with a perfect, immutable being. Ghazali's evaluation of this claim is surgically precise. He accepts the premise of God's eternal will for the sake of argument and proceeds to show how it leads to a different conclusion. He posits that an eternal will can indeed will a temporal event. The will itself is eternal, but what is willed is the world's coming into being at a designated point. He employs an analogy: a man may make a decision tomorrow to begin a journey the day after. The decision is fixed, yet the action it determines is in the future. Likewise, God's eternal decree is for the world to begin at a specific, chosen instant. This maneuver reveals the philosopher's conflation of the eternality of the act of willing with the eternality of the object willed. His critique further deepens by exposing an unproven premise within their system, that a temporal creation necessitates a new determinant acting upon the divine will. Ghazali counters that the will itself is the principle of specification. It requires no external catalyst to choose one possibility over another. The divine will is absolutely free. In his second discussion concerning the world's post-eternity or future everlastingness, he applies a similar logical pressure, demonstrating that the philosopher's arguments for this are as speculative as those for its preternity. In the third and fourth discussions, he turns his attention to the philosophers' claim that they can prove God is the creator of the world and that God is one. His evaluation here is an exercise in epistemological deflation. He argues that while their proofs for a necessary being may stand, these proofs are insufficient to establish that this being is the willful creator of the universe as understood in revealed religion. The philosopher's God, an intellect eternally contemplating itself and from which the world emanates as a necessary consequence of our cry from the personal, volitional God of the Quran. Their proofs for unity are similarly found wanting, reliant on definitions and conceptual relationships that remain within the realm of mind, lacking a demonstrated connection to external reality. Throughout this entire section, Ghazali's core claim is that the philosopher's metaphysical conclusions are products of dialectical reasoning, entirely lacking the demonstrative certainty of mathematics or empirical observation. Section 2. The divine attributes and God's knowledge of particulars. Having challenged the philosopher's cosmological foundations, Ghazali proceeds to dissect their conception of the divine attributes, a venture that culminates in one of his most potent and enduring critiques. This sequence, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 13th discussion, scrutinizes the philosopher's attempts to reconcile God's absolute simplicity and immutability with the affirmation of divine attributes like life, power, and knowledge. The central problem, as Ghazali identifies it, is that the philosophers, in their zeal to avoid any hint of multiplicity or composition in the divine essence, effectively empty the attributes of their meaning. They reduce attributes to the divine essence itself or to mere negations, a position Ghazali finds both illogical and theologically hollow. For instance, to say God is knowing becomes, for the philosophers, a statement about the pure, simple essence from which the intelligible order of the universe emanates. It is a knowledge devoid of the particularity and detail that the term implies in common and religious parlance. The apex of this critique is reached in his celebrated 11th discussion on the question of whether God knows temporal particulars. The philosophers, led by Avicenna, are trapped illogical. If God's knowledge were to encompass changing, individual events, like the standing or sitting of a particular person, then God's knowledge itself would have to change. A change in knowledge implies a change in the knower, which contradicts the fundamental axiom of divine immutability. Their proposed solution is that God knows particulars in a universal manner. God knows all the causes and universal principles governing the cosmos, and through this universal knowledge encompasses all particulars that fall under those principles, without knowing them in their individual, temporal specificity. Ghazali's assessment of this claim is devastating. He dismisses it as a form of sophisticated ignorance, a semantic game that preserves the word knowledge while gutting it of its substance. He argues that knowledge of the universal principle all men is conceptually distinct from knowledge of the individuals Said and Amma. To know the species is a different cognitive act from knowing the individual member. Therefore, the philosopher's God, despite knowing the universal form of humanity, remains ignorant of the existence and actions of individual human beings. This conclusion, Ghazali argues, is philosophically incoherent and a direct contradiction of religious teaching. His analysis hinges on showing that the philosophers have prioritized their abstract definition of immutability over the logical requirements of what constitutes knowledge. He reveals their conception of a perfect being forces them into a position where that being is less knowledgeable about the world than an ordinary human. The intellectual wit here is sharp in their attempt to elevate God. The philosophers have inadvertently diminished the divine. Section 3. Causality, natural law, and the possibility of miracles. Perhaps the most philosophically radical section of the Incoherence of the Philosophers is Ghazali's 17th discussion, which directly assaults the concept of necessary causal connection in the natural world. This argument is prepared by his preceding analyses of physics and celestial intelligences, where he progressively dismantles the philosopher's mechanistic view of the cosmos. The philosophers maintain that natural phenomena are governed by immutable laws. Fire, by its intrinsic nature, causes burning water by its nature, causes quenching. Effects follow necessarily from their causes due to the inherent properties, or essences of things. Ghazali's evaluation of this claim is a masterpiece of empirical skepticism that anticipates arguments made centuries later in European philosophy. He contends that the connection between what is commonly believed to be a cause and what is believed to be an effect is an observation of constant conjunction, a habit of the mind, and never a logical necessity. We observe that when fire touches cotton, the cotton burns. We do not, however, observe the necessary connection itself. The burning, he asserts, is created directly by God at the moment of contact with the fire. Fire is an inanimate object and possesses no power to create the attribute of burning in another object. The agent who truly acts is God alone. The observed regularity in nature is what Ghazali calls the custom or habit of God, the Sunnah of Allah. God has established a consistent pattern in creation, allowing for the predictability necessary for human life and science. However, this custom is a product of divine will, and that will is free to suspend it. This provides the metaphysical foundation for the possibility of miracles. The story of Abraham being cast into the fire without being burned is not a violation of logic, it is a demonstration of God's direct and unmediated power as the sole cause of all events. God simply willed the creation of the fire without the creation of its customary effect, burning. Ghazali's analysis here is profound in its implications. It recasts the entire relationship between God and the world. The universe is a continuous creation, held in existence moment by the divine will. There are no secondary causes, no intermediary powers, and no natural laws operating independently of God. Every flicker of a flame, every fall of a stone, is a direct act of the divine agent. His critique of causality is a powerful evaluation of the limits of empirical inference. He argues that from the repeated observation of sequence, the philosophers have illicitly inferred a conclusion of metaphysical necessity. Their physics, like their metaphysics, is built upon a speculative leap unsupported by either pure reason or direct observation. Section 4, The Soul's Destiny and the Charge of Unbelief. The final 3 discussions of the Tao that carry the greatest theological weight, as they are the grounds upon which Ghazali levels the charge of unbelief, or kafir, against the philosophers. These discussions concern the nature of the soul and the reality of the afterlife. In the 18th and 19th discussions, he examines the philosophers' proofs for the soul's self-subsistence and its inability to be annihilated, while he actually finds their arguments for the soul's spirituality and immortality to be plausible and even useful. His focus is, as always, on their claimed demonstrative certainty. He concludes that their proofs, while strong, remain within the realm of the probable and fail to achieve the level of a pedantic truth. This finding is strategic, as it sets the stage for his final and most severe critique in the 20th discussion, their denial of the bodily resurrection. The philosophers, consistent with their Hellenistic framework, conceived of the afterlife as a purely spiritual affair. The immortal, intellectual soul, freed from the prison of the body, would find its bliss in the eternal contemplation of the intelligible realities. They viewed the Quranic descriptions of a physical paradise and hell, with their tangible pleasures and pains, as allegories designed for the comprehension of the uneducated masses. Ghazali's evaluation of this position is twofold. First, he argues that from a purely philosophical standpoint, there is absolutely no rational argument that can demonstrate the impossibility of bodily resurrection. Reason, on its own, can neither prove nor disprove it. The reassembly of scattered parts by an omnipotent creator is entirely within the realm of possibility. To declare it impossible is an act of philosophical hubris, an overstepping of the known limits of reason. Second, he argues that the denial of bodily resurrection constitutes a direct rejection of the clear and unambiguous meaning of revealed scripture. Unlike other verses which might admit of allegorical interpretation, the texts describing the resurrection of the body are explicit and foundational to the faith. To reinterpret them away is to substitute human speculation for divine word. Here, Ghazali's project reaches its ultimate conclusion. He identifies 3 specific doctrines where the philosophers' conclusions place them outside the fold of Islam: their assertion of the world preternity, their claim that God's knowledge does not extend to particulars, and their denial of the resurrection of the body. His analysis throughout the book has been a meticulous preparation for this final judgment, demonstrating section by section that these very conclusions, are the ones least supported by the philosopher's own standards of rational demonstration. They are the product of speculation, not proving, and therefore provide no legitimate grounds for contradicting the explicit claims of revelation. In conclusion, Al-Ghazali's The Incoherence of the Philosophers is far more than a simple polemic. It is a sophisticated and sustained work of epistemological critique. The internal evaluation of its claims reveals a consistent and powerful methodology, the use of philosophical reasoning to chart the proper boundaries of philosophical inquiry, from his deconstruction of the proofs for the world's eternity to his radical reassessment of causality and his defense of corporeal resurrection. Ghazali's central thesis remains constant. He demonstrates that while reason is a powerful tool for understanding the created world and the formal structures of logic, it falters while it attempts to pronounce with certainty on the nature of God, the divine will, and the ultimate realities of the unseen. The philosophers' incoherence lies precisely in their failure to recognize this limitation, in their mistaken belief that their dialectical and speculative arguments carried the force of absolute demonstration. Ghazali's evaluation successfully shows that their most cherished metaphysical doctrines are built on unproven premises and logical leaps. By dismantling the edifice of their certainty, he sought to restore a sense of intellectual humility and reopen the path for a faith grounded in revelation, a faith that could coexist with, yet ultimately transcend, the findings of unaided human reason. The work's enduring significance resides in this masterfully executed evaluation, which established a new and critical relationship between philosophy and theology that would shape intellectual discourse for centuries to come.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.